Just 2 episodes in, and House of the Dragon is all that people seem to be talking about, with the show's premiere raking in about 10 million views and the viewership going up by 2% with the release of the second episode of the season. It's pretty evident that this Game of Thrones prequel is on its way to breaking all records set by its predecessor. But as we unravel new chapters in the history of the Seven Kingdoms and get to know the Targaryen family on a deeper level, every episode of the show seems to be coming with its twists and turns. The latest one being a villain that makes the White Walkers from the main show look like a bunch of kindergartners. So, who is this new villain threatening the entirety of Westeros 200 years before the events of Game of Thrones? Stay tuned till the end of the video to find out all of this and more. The pilot face-off. The first episode of House of the Dragon reminded a lot of people of Game of Thrones in terms of its story building. The reason why people fell in love with Game of Thrones was that the show was loyal to no one. So, while we spent the entire first season following Ned Stark's journey, the finale showed him dying an untimely death as the story took a brand new turn. This kind of unpredictability is what kept people glued to the original show, and it seems like House of the Dragon promises to follow in the same footsteps. However, House of the Dragon is paced a bit more slowly than the previous show. So, by the end of the premiere of Game of Thrones, the audience knows the good guys from the bad, and, well, let's just say that if you remember the final scene of the first episode of the main show, you'll know exactly what we're talking about here. But House of the Dragon is a bit more complicated. First things first, the pilot episode is sort of a prequel to the prequel where we see some of the major characters in the show at a much younger age before the fight for the throne officially kicks off. And this small flashback is pretty interesting to watch if you're looking to understand the context of the world that is Westeros, where we left things off. While the pilots of the two shows have plenty of stark, no pun intended, differences, fans can't help but notice how both of them end on twists that set us up for the rest of the season. We all know what that twist was in the original show, but somehow the twist that was revealed to us at the end of House of the Dragon premiere was something that no one could have seen coming. By the end of the episode, the audience is still reeling from the fact that Viserys lost his wife and unborn son who was meant to be the heir to the Iron Throne. But that's when the king announces his firstborn, Princess Rhaenyra, is his official successor, much to the dismay of his brother Daemon. But this is also when he lets his daughter in on a family secret. In the timeline of Game of Thrones, the audience is led to believe that Aegon the Conqueror came to Westeros and fell in love with the place, which is why he decided to conquer and rule over the region. However, Viserys reveals that we can only call a deep Targaryen family secret by saying that Aegon had a premonition about a harsh winter that no one would be able to survive. The king dreamed of enemies from the icy north, and for anyone who has watched Game of Thrones, you know that Aegon was talking about none other than the creepy White Walkers. So this is House of the Dragon's subtle way to pay tribute to the mythology of the original show, while giving the fans something to anticipate as the show moves forward. The time skip and what it means. With the release of the second episode of House of the Dragon, avid fans now seem to be getting into the story, noticing the small little Easter eggs and coming up with fans' theories about the show's characters and story arc. Now, one of the original show's distinguishing storytelling techniques was that it made use of time jumps a lot. So the viewers would be thrown from one timeline into the other, and then it was on them to figure out the puzzle pieces. House of the Dragon seems to be doing the same thing, as there's a 1-year time jump between the first and second episodes of the show. But what does this skip mean? Well, it just means that the story of the show is going to be pretty fast-paced. And well, it makes sense, right? Right now, we're at one of the earlier generations of the Targaryen family. Now, going by the rumors, this is the show that will give us the explanation of what made the Mad King go mad. But for that to happen, we need to skip time quite a lot. This is also why rumor has it that there's yet another time jump in the third episode, and because the showrunners have cast multiple actresses to play the role of the iconic Rhaenyra, it all makes sense now. Something wicked this way comes. Now that we all know of this, let's dive into what the second episode of the show was all about. As of yet, it's pretty evident that House of the Dragon is more focused on the Targaryen family than anything else. So while the setting is in the familiar kingdom of Westeros, the storyline is completely different than it was in Game of Thrones, where we constantly were switching between the Seven Kingdoms. This time around, we're taking a deep dive into the Targaryen family tree as they initiate a civil war for the succession of the throne one after the other. However, as the family split into two, we have a hunch that they might be forced into coming together to eliminate a much more dangerous external threat that we now know as the Crabfeeder. Once again, we are introduced to this brand new character in the final moments of the second episode as the villain captures a bunch of pirates and nails them to the ground in the Stepstones before he leaves them there to drown or be eaten alive by crabs. Pretty graphic, right? It's an overwhelming introduction to a new character, but it seems like House of the Dragon isn't holding anything back. So, who is the Crabfeeder, and what is his connection to the Targaryens? Going by the books. Of course, the most avid fans of Game of Thrones would know that the Crabfeeder has never been mentioned in the original show. But if you've read Fire and Blood by George R.R. Martin, which is essentially the source material for the show, you would know that the Crabfeeder was once known as Cragus Drahar. Draper was a Moorish prince who earned his nickname because he would stalk pirates on beaches, pushing them to drown in the high tides and get eaten alive by crabs, a move that would go on to become his signature. What's more is that the Crabfeeder also suffers from a fatal disease that has spread to his face, making him look deformed. Rumor has it that this is the same illness that has killed Game of Thrones characters like Jorah Mormont and Shireen Baratheon. So to hide that and maintain his fear within the hearts of his enemies, the villain wears a mask that makes him look 10 times scarier. The villain's constant traveling and crimes have also resulted in parts of his face burning and becoming completely scorched, which might also explain the mask. The Free Cities. According to Game of Thrones lore, the Crabfeeder is a member of the Triarchy, an alliance of the Free Cities. What are Free Cities? 9 free city-states make up the free cities of Essos, Braavos, Lorath, Lys, Myr, Norvos, Pentos, Quohar, Tyrosh, and Volantis. And while these cities are constantly at odds with one another, 3 of them, namely Lys, Myr, and Trosh, have formed the Triarchy alliance with each other, and at this point, their combined strengths and influence can ruin Westeros within seconds. So while these free cities have issues of their own, Westeros dare not cross them in case they decide to team up and take the kingdom down. The Free Cities are also an important trade ally, and not just that, but the Iron Bank of Braavos is also where Westeros keeps most of its wealth. So it's safe to say that picking a fight with the Free Cities or their alliance is not a good idea. The Stepstones. Swiftly moving on from the Free Cities, Episode 2 will then introduce you to a place called the Stepstones. This is a small rocky island chain that's between Westeros and Essos. Now, you know how we talked about the Free Cities being important trade allies for Westeros? Well, this is where the Stepstones come in. While these pieces of land have no value of their own since no one can build anything on them, but their importance lies in the fact that they facilitate the trade between Westeros and Essos, helping their economies. But at the same time, because of their discrete location, the Stepstones are prime hubs for all kinds of criminal activity, which is where the Crabfeeder comes in. The truth is that the Stepstones are the perfect stop for pirates to stake out potential victims while remaining hidden in plain sight. And as the Crabfeeder is upping his game, it seems like the Stepstones are what he's really after. How do we know this? The first time that the Crabfeeder was mentioned was in the opening sequence of the second episode, where Corlys Velaryon is heard talking about the Stepstone Islands being taken over. However, in the large council meeting, no one really listens to him and moves on. But of course, this decision will probably come back and haunt all of the council people in their dreams. At this point in the show, Drahar has started taking over all possible Stepstones to carry out his criminal activities. Velaryon's statement in the meeting basically tells us how the man, along with many other merchants of Westeros, are losing their ships, goods, money, and even lives because of a pirate called the Crabfeeder, who has completely taken over the trade route to commit all kinds of crime. Book versus show. In the books, the Crabfeeder is a landlord who is actually responsible for setting up the trade routes between Westeros and the Free Cities, creating an entire toll system to charge money for ships to pass through the route. In the books, the system worked for a while, but with the rising fuel prices, the people went on to criticize the man for his ways. In the show, however, Drahar is not the innocent-seeming landlord that he is in the books. The show presents him as a criminal who bides his time at the Stepstones before he finds his next victim. As seen in the final scene of the second episode, the man regularly harasses ships and tries to extort money from the passengers before killing them and leaving them for the crabs to feast upon. So, what does the future look like for Westeros and the Targaryen family in general, with the Crabfeeder on their tails? I guess we're just going to have to take things one episode at a time. That's all for today's video. If you enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, The Focus, for more movie-related news. And we'll see you next time. Bye.